To our game picks, we're going to start with the New York Jets. They are the road team against the Giants this weekend in the Meadowlands, so no travel for either team. The Jets are 5-6, or excuse me, the Jets are 6-5. The New York Giants are 5-6. Giants atop the lead in the NFC East, and the Jets are tied at the top of the wild card in the AFC. The injuries first. For the Jets, Darrelle Revis is out again. Brandon Marshall, the wide receiver, is probable. For the Giants, three listed, all out. Larry Donnell, the tight end. Devon Kennard, the linebacker. And Brandon Merriweather, the safety. A very interesting game here, especially with the Revis injury. So they're going to have one less gun to go against, so to speak, against Odell Beckham Jr. I look for Antonio Cromartie to pick up the slack there. Gilchrist as well to move forward. But Beckham should have a field day in this game. Brandon Marshall is going to attack the Giants secondary. I expect Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie to get the majority of the time on Brandon Marshall as well. You look at Ryan Fitzpatrick, 20 touchdowns to 11 interceptions. We've discussed his turnovers all season long. At times he's limited them. At times he's had a lot of them. Eli Manning having one of his better seasons, quietly under the radar, 23 touchdowns to 9 interceptions. I'm curious to see if the Giants are going to commit to the run in this game. Rashad Jennings hasn't been averaging 3 yards per carry. Doesn't even have 500 yards yet this season. Now they've been splitting a lot of the carries. But still, you would expect more from that. So it's not that the Giants don't like to run. It's they don't really have a weapon to go to in the running game. But I think they're going to have to establish it. I look for Chris Ivory to be running well. He's having a very good season for the Jets. Almost 5 yards per carry. They're going to need him to play well. And they're going to need to control the clock because I expect Fitzpatrick to have one of his turnover games considering he limited him last week. Interesting game here. No travel, as we discussed, so you don't have to worry about that for any team. The Giants are desperate, so are the Jets. Both teams playing, basically fighting for the playoff lives here. Giants off a loss. I expect them to right the ship and come back and get this game. I think it'll be close for a majority of the game, but I think Odell Beckham Jr. is going to play too well because, as we discussed, as good of a cornerback as Antonio Cromartie is, I don't think he's going to shut down Odell Beckham Jr. the whole game. So I like the Giants in this game. I like it to be 27-17, and they will move to 6-6 and even their record and see if they can't get things started. All right, next up, the Arizona Cardinals at 9-2 travel to St. Louis to play the Rams. Injuries for the visiting Cardinals. Chris Johnson, the running back, is on injury reserve. All these next three are questionables. Larry Fitzgerald, the wide receiver. John Brown, the wide receiver. And Gerard Powers, the cornerback. Andre Ellington, the running back, is out. For the Rams, Stedman Bailey, the wide receiver, out. The rest are questionables. Greg Zuerlein, the kicker. Robert Quinn, defensive end. And Case Keenum, the quarterback. I don't know where St. Louis is going to go if Case Keenum is healthy and active, if they're going to go back to Nick Foles or go with Case Keenum. Really doesn't matter because neither quarterback's playing that well. I guess it's the lesser of two evils. I would go with Case Keenum, but again, he's shown nothing spectacular this season. Carson Palmer having a good year. I'm going to be curious to see how he does without Chris Johnson or Andre Ellington in the running game. He's going to have to throw the ball a lot, and two of his receivers are listed as questionable. So he's got a lot of work he's going to have to do in this game. And that is the reason why I'm going to pick the St. Louis Rams. We've discussed that they've been Jekyll and Hyde all season, a lot of Jekyll of late, or excuse me, a lot of Mr. Hyde of late. That would be the negative because they haven't been playing well. They're on a 4-game losing streak. Jeff Fisher calling out the media, saying this team isn't trying that hard. The media, that is. Jeff Fisher was defending his team, saying that they are trying. If you watch them in practice, you would know that. So I don't think the Rams are going to lose 5 straight. Cardinals have a few games to play with. I think with their injuries, they're going to have a bit of a letdown in this game, and that's where St. Louis is going to rise up and surprise the Arizona Cardinals in this game. I'd like it to be low scoring because of the injuries to the Cardinal offense, and there's nothing that would lead me to believe that St. Louis's offense can do much of anything. So I like the game to be 20-16, and that Arizona struggles to find the end zone in this game. All right, next, the Atlanta Falcons at 6-5 travel to Tampa Bay to play the Buccaneers. Big game in the NFC South and wildcard positioning as well for both teams. The injuries first for the visiting Falcons. Matt Bryant, their kicker, is out. Leonard Hankerson, the wide receiver, is on injury reserve. Devin Hester, wide receiver, kick returner, is probable, and Devontae Freeman, the running back, is probable. For the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, all are listed as questionable. Gerald McCoy, the defensive tackle, Vincent Jackson, wide receiver, Luke Stocker, tight end, and Austin Seferian-Jenkins, the tight end. Now, Tampa Bay, off a loss. They had a tough game last week. Atlanta has lost 5 of their last 6 since getting off to that 5-0 start. They're in free fall, that is. Julio Jones, I expect him to really have a big game against this suspect, to be kind, Tampa Bay secondary. Julio Jones almost at 100 catches already, 6 touchdowns only, but almost 1,300 yards, just about 1,250 this year. Doug Martin quietly having a good season. A lot of the hype's going to Jameis Winston for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Doug Martin already over 1,000 yards. He's over 5 yards per carry, but only 3 touchdowns. Now, with Devontae Freeman back in the lineup for the Atlanta Falcons, he's been battling injuries of late. He is certainly coming back to earth a bit since getting off to that spectacular start as the rookie. He does have 9 touchdowns, though, and Atlanta's really going to need him. This is a very interesting game. I wonder where Tampa Bay is as far as their maturity level to win a game at home against a team that's ahead of them in the playoffs. A win will tie Tampa Bay with Atlanta and open up a real logjam, especially with the potential for some of these other games with teams at 5 and 6 and other teams at 4 and 7 who can certainly get right in the mix in the playoff picture in the NFC. So I wonder what Tampa Bay is going to do, and I don't expect Tampa Bay to be able to handle the pressure. It's kind of tough to go with Atlanta. I went with them last week. They burned me. They are not playing well, but this is a game I don't see Tampa Bay having what it takes. They were playing well of late, and I think off that loss, they're going to have a bit of a letdown in this game. So I like Atlanta to come out of there with the win, and I like it to be 27-23. But I may be regretting that one because Atlanta has shown us nothing over these last couple weeks. All right, next up, very interesting game. The Seattle Seahawks travel to Minnesota to play the Vikings. The Seahawks are 6-5. They've won 2 straight. The Minnesota Vikings are at 8-3. They are sitting on top of the NFC North, and after that Packers win yesterday, they certainly are feeling the pressure to get this win. The injuries first for the visiting Seahawks. Jimmy Graham is on injury reserve. Paul Richardson, the wide receiver, is questionable. For the Vikings, all questionables. Andrew Sendejo, the safety, Harrison Smith, the other safety, and Anthony Barr, the linebacker. So we got to start right away with the injuries. You have Jimmy Graham out, and Minnesota, where they would be suspect to defend a tight end, their safeties are both questionable. So potential matchup there that won't exist in this game. For Minnesota, Teddy Bridgewater does only have 8 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. We've discussed it all year long. It doesn't appear like they're going to take the reins off him, at least this season. I think you're going to have to in a game like this, but as we've discussed throughout the season, that we'd expect Norv Turner to do at some point. He has not, so I'm not expecting it to happen this time, especially against that vaunted Seattle secondary. Minnesota, their top receiver is Stephon Diggs, and he has 40 receptions for just over 600 yards and only 2 touchdowns, so certainly nothing scares you as far as a game breaker for the Minnesota Vikings, and I expect that they're going to put a lot of pressure on Teddy Bridgewater, Seattle that is, and they're going to allow their secondary, the strongest part of their team with Richard Sherman, Earl Thomas, Cam Chancellor, to be able to play back and really play one-on-one, and they're going to be dropping 8 in the box a lot in an attempt to shut down Adrian Peterson, who's having a spectacular season. With that, I don't see how Minnesota's going to find a way to win this game. It may serve as a blessing in disguise where they find out they have to throw and they have to test what Teddy Bridgewater can do downfield. But at this point, they're not going to be able to figure it out in time for this game. And I look for Russell Wilson to have a good day and Seattle to keep rolling. And I'm liking Seattle relatively handily in this game. I like it 31-21. All right, next up we have the Houston Texans, quietly on a 4-game win streak, up to 6-5. They're traveling to Buffalo to play the Bills, who have dropped 2 straight. Buffalo is now 5-6. Another interesting game in the playoff race. Buffalo certainly needs the win to get back into it, and Houston is sitting not only on top of their division, but they are also right in the wild card chase at 6-5 with a lot of other teams that are there. So a lot of implications for this game for both teams, and probably a lot more riding on it for the Houston Texans, being that they are in 2 playoff chases. Buffalo is really only won the wild card, so an important game either way. Just 1 second here. All right, going to give you the injuries in just a second. Sorry, having trouble bringing it up. All right, injuries first for the visiting Texans. All listed as probable. J.J. Watt, defensive end, Alfred Blue, running back, and DeAndre Hopkins, wide receiver. For the Bills, Tyrod Taylor, the quarterback, is probable. Nigel Bradham, John Miller, a linebacker and guard, respectively, are both out. Central Henderson, the offensive tackle, is doubtful. Mario Williams, the defensive end, is probable. I immediately look at the injuries, and I look at the out and doubtful on the offensive line. So that's certainly going to be a problem with the Houston pass rush and their defense, which is really coming along of late, especially with Jadeveon Clowney playing well, and we certainly know what J.J. Watt is capable of. LaShawn McCoy is going to need to find a way to work around that defensive line. However he has to do it this game, it's going to be a hard running day for him, so I'm not expecting much. The DeAndre Hopkins, the wide receiver for Houston, against Stephon Gilmore is going to be a very good matchup. Stephon Gilmore, a big receiver, or a big cornerback, that is, to cover big receivers. DeAndre Hopkins, 81 receptions, just under 1,100 yards and 9 touchdowns. So he's playing very well this season. It's been a quiet, not quiet for him because he's playing well, but certainly the hype around him has been quiet this season. Tyrod Taylor probable to go. He's got to have to play his best. Really having a quality season when you look at it, 14 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. But on the other side, Brian Hoyer, a guy who I've been critical of, has very similar numbers to Tyrod Taylor. He has 15 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Their yardage is just about the same. And they have basically thrown the same amount of passes and completed right around the same amount. So 2 quarterbacks, Tyrod Taylor, a guy I've been very high on, Brian Hoyer, a guy I have not. But now that I look at it, their stats are very similar. So I got to start giving Brian Hoyer a little love. Buffalo is going to be desperate in this game. They're home. This is a game they need to win. I think Houston's going to be game and really make it tough for Buffalo. But I look at the 2 straight losses for Buffalo and the 4 straight wins for Houston, and I would see it coming out in Buffalo's favor. I don't know what necessarily is going to happen. It's kind of a difficult thing to pick it this way, especially considering the injuries to the offensive line that we just discussed for Houston. Well, the injuries to the offensive line for Buffalo and Houston's defensive line. But I certainly think Buffalo is going to get this win, and Sammy Watkins is really going to have to step up. Only 31 receptions thus far this season. So I'm liking Buffalo in a low-scoring game between 2 good defenses. I like it to be 20-17 in favor of the Bills.